I want to turn the time over to our keynote speaker. I am so excited to hear from Jennifer Schillaci. I've known her for several years now. We met at an RV summit in person over the
Yeah.
years. And I've watched her from afar, do all kinds of amazing things, raise an incredible family, running some great businesses. So I thought of her immediately when I knew we were going to put this summit together. And then when she reached back out and shared with me the things she what had on her heart to share, I knew she was going to be a great person to hold the keynote position and really set the stage for this summit. And so without further ado, Jennifer, I'm going to turn things over to you. Welcome.
Thanks, Kimberly. Can I just start by saying it's really good to be here? For starters today, we're going to do this campfire style. And all I mean by that is there's no slides. It's kind of like sitting around talking to somebody. But I want to start with a confession. When I was asked to speak today about mobile entrepreneurship and scaling a business on the road, I, I laughed a little because the version of me that pulled out of our driveway in 2013 had no idea what she was doing. I was just trying not to panic. So let's go back. It's 2013. Frank, my husband, he's a retired United States Marine with 20 years of service. He's just hung up his uniform the year previously. He's finishing his Bible degree from Liberty University. And somewhere in that beautiful chaos, we made a decision that most people in our lives thought was somewhere between brave and absolutely completely out of our minds. We packed up 6 out of 7 of our kids, ranging from 15 months old to 13 years old. We rented out our house and rolled out in an RV to see the country that Frank had protected for the last 20 years. Now you're wondering what happened to our oldest. She was 18 at the time. She said, I love you. I mean it, but I don't want to be any part of that. So we just respected those wishes and she moved down. We helped her move out. But here's where it gets messy. And it gets messy really early on with us because there's lots and lots to talk about. But this is for every single one of you that's ever introduced yourself by saying, I'm just a something. Because I was just a homeschool mom. That's it. That was my whole resume, unless you count Marine Corps wife. No corporate background, no business degree, no professional network, 6 kids in an RV, the mom that always started the homeschool co-ops as we got to places, a husband that had just transitioned out of the military, and I was redefining my role as a Marine Corps wife as not a Marine Corps wife. So I couldn't quite name even what I was when we left. Just a homeschool mom. I want you to hold on to that phrase because I'm going to come back to it a few times today. And by the time we're done, I hope it means something completely different to you than it did when we walked in this room. We did not have a plan. We had dreams, like many of you. We had a ton of faith. We had a teeny tiny budget, specifically a military retirement check once a month, and whatever we had managed to save. That was it. There was no business, there was no brand, there was no strategy. It was just us as a family in our RV on the road. And for the first 6 months, it was us living in vacation mode. It was beautiful and it was hard and it was messy. And some weeks we were eating beans and rice for the last 2 weeks of the month because that's what we had left to play with. But here's the thing nobody tells you about stripping your life down to actually what matters. You start to see real clearly. When you're not carrying that mortgage because we'd rented the house or a car payment because we owned the camper and we'd owned the RV, and the overhead of life built around status, you start to ask some different questions. Not how to maintain what I have, but how do I actually build? And that question changed everything for us. By the end of the first year, I knew that we needed to supplement our income. It just wasn't fun, you know. Frank, because he was a Marine and he was sitting still, is not in his wiring, got very good at baking bread. I want you to know that because it's true. And it's important. And it's a lot cheaper to bake yourself a fresh loaf of bread than it is to buy one from the store. He could make a beautiful bread and donuts. He could do Krispy Kreme. But bread was not going to be our business. So back then, I joined a direct sales company right away. And for a season, it helped. It kept us moving. It taught me more than I expected about selling and about community and about what feels like to genuinely believe in something that you're sharing with the people that you're meeting. And that lesson would come back later in ways I would never predict. But the real shift came in the spring of 2014. So we pulled into Tucson, Arizona for a full-time families rally. And if you don't know, there's quite a few families on the road doing what we do today. And if you've never been to a rally, imagine a campground full of people who look at a conventional lifestyle and go, no, thank you. And then figure out how to build something different on the road. Those were our people. We found connection. But Frank stepped into something that would quietly change the trajectory of our family. He found his way into mobile RV roofing, a trade that came to the client that we had never done before, that could be done on the road. It required hard physical labor. It required him to be away from home. But as a Marine Corps wife, 3 days on a job was no real big deal because he still came home at night. These are things that retired Marines have in abundance, some, dedication and loyalty and precision and reliability. He could do an install, maybe 2 a month. We could keep traveling. It was not glamorous. We didn't get to choose where we got to go. The work would dictate what we got to see. But we were building and we were together and we were free in a way that a lot of people spend their whole lives chasing. By 2016, Frank had moved into a managerial role and logistics role in that company. And I'll be honest with you, it was not his idea, not entirely. I put his name in the ring because I knew what he was capable of when he was too humble to say so. So he had a backpack on his work days and he had a mobile office. So he could be hiking in Yosemite or Yellowstone and he could be taking calls as long as we were in, a place where we could do that. We carried multiple carriers and cell phones. So, we made it work. But here's the thing about working for someone else's dream. Eventually, if you're honest with yourself, you'll realize you're going to feel the ceiling. By 2020, we were part of that company and it was doing really, really well. We were valid contributors. We felt like we were valued, but we were building someone else's equity. And we knew that we needed to build something that was ours. But how? Well, that sometimes is its own kind of roadblock because comfortable is its own trap, right? Steady is its own ceiling. And choosing to walk away from steady into uncertain, well, that takes a different kind of courage than starting something from nothing. But we jumped. So let's paint a picture. There was a meeting that kind of changed everything, but not all at once. Frank had spent years building into that company, and he was good at it, really, really good. He was one of two service advisors, but there was a message being sent over and over and over because I helped find the teams to come on board, but they didn't want me. Not my ideas, not my growing social media following, not the SEO courses that I had paid out of pocket for and stayed up late studying because I just knew that content and community were going to be critical and matter more than I wanted to, but I wasn't what they were looking for. In fact, they'd made it pretty clear that a homeschool mom with a small social media following and no industry credentials wasn't the asset they wanted. Just a homeschool mom. That message resonated loud and clear. I think a lot of you have heard that version of that message. Maybe not those exact words, but that energy, that closed door, that sense that the table that you're standing at was not set for you. And I didn't know if I'd get through this without crying, and we're not even like minutes in. Here's what I want you to hear. Sometimes that closed door is a gift. Because in January of 2020 at the Tampa Super Show, one of the biggest RV events in the country, I walked into a booth that would change the trajectory of our life. Not all at once. His name was Scott. Scott was the original owner of the company we now own called RV Roofing Solutions. His company was built on handshakes and miles and sheer force of will. He had a product that was genuinely excellent. It was a system so similar to what Frank and I had spent years installing that I almost thought he was a copycat, except it would turn out several years later that he was actually the original. He had dreams to grow the business, but wasn't sure where to begin. What he didn't have was marketing. So, me, the homeschool mom who hadn't really had a traditional job in over 20 years, who had been told repeatedly for years that she wasn't what the industry wanted, had been quietly building exactly that skill set for years. SEO, content strategy, social media, community building. I'd taken the courses, I'd put in the hours, I'd been learning in the margins of the life that we lived on the road because something knew someday that it would matter. So Scott asked me if I could build a social media presence for RV Roofing Solutions. Of course, I said yes, but he couldn't pay much. He offered $100 a week. Now, that's not a vote of confidence, but he looked at a homeschool mom who hadn't had a real job in over 20 years and saw something worth betting on. That meant more to me than he probably ever knew. So I said yes. Now, Frank still worked for the other company. We were not discussing business at home. And it wasn't because of the conflict of interest. It was actually because of integrity. So we would actually separate to different parts of the camper during the day to have those conversations with different people. I would call Scott and build up the marketing and go from there. I wasn't talking to clients yet. And Frank would work the other job from the other side of the house. And at dinner, we didn't discuss any of it. Made for an interesting layer of marriage, but we were just trusting that it would work out. $100 a week. Fun money. It was meant for pizza and field trips with the kids. It was just meant for fun. Well, the work was moving. Facebook was working. Instagram was picking up. A single YouTube video was getting consistent views. Nothing viral, nothing major. It was a smaller company. They literally were in the margins in this space. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't real. I mean, it was real, but it was steady. It was the kind of growth that tells you you're building something with legs, slowly, but intentionally. By July that year, the other company decided to let Frank go. And just like that, the wall came down. But here's what I need you to understand about that moment, because I think that's the part that gets glossed over in entrepreneurship stories. Frank didn't step into a leadership role. He didn't come in as a partner at that point, or an executive, or a strategist, or a service advisor. He went back on roofs as an installer. A United States Marine who had spent years in the management role, back on rooftops, doing the physical work, one job at a time. Well, now I had to build it because now this business needed to work for us. There's no work Frank won't do. There's no job beneath him because the mission matters more than the title. And when he was on rooftops, I was on the laptop, just a homeschool mom, building Facebook pages and Instagram accounts and figuring out YouTube and learning what made people stop scrolling and having campfire conversations. Nobody gave me a playbook. I just kept showing up and asking questions. But we were all in, both of us, because we had to be, whatever it took. So I went back to Scott. I told him Frank was available. I told him the business was growing. I told him we were ready to be all in. He made a promise of a percentage of a company if we kept building. So we kept building. I asked for 2%. I know that seems like a small number. But Scott started to see what happens when you combine a solid product with an intentional marketing plan and a team that actually believes in what they're selling. We got busier and busier and busier. And so we're moving. It's 2020. He sat at the same booth at the Tampa Super Show for literally years, selling, a few roofs a year, the same handshake business, waiting for the growth that he knew was possible, but hadn't found a path to. By 2022, he had named me on most of the company's assets as a 50% partner. Let's go back to just a homeschool mom, now as a 50% partner. But I need you to hear both of those things at the same time. So, slow growth, not overnight success, not a viral moment that changes everything on a weekend. The quiet, unglamorous, show up every single day kind of growth that most people think quit before they ever see a payoff. That's what 2020 and 2020, when everyone got stir crazy and went out and bought a camper, they needed a roof. So it was okay. And I was there, not with some big, bold headline, not with a flashy ad campaign, just quietly showing up in the conversations, in the communities, in the comment section, show up, be helpful, be consistent, help teams find work, tell the truth about the product. And it worked. Because, I mean, if you've got a great product, you don't have to lie. Well, then came 2021. Have you ever lived like you were like stuck inside a dumpster fire? This story kind of goes sideways that way a few times because Scott got COVID. 6 weeks of not knowing, 6 weeks of Frank and I looking at each other across whatever campground we were parked at the time, asking each other, asking the same questions that neither one of us could say out loud. What happens if Scott doesn't make it? What happens to the business? We had installs scheduled, teams in the field, clients who had paid deposits that were counting on us. And I had never received any official paperwork on my ownership, which meant legally I was managing a business that I didn't officially own any part of. So we did what we do when there's no other option. We kept moving. Every installer got paid. We made sure of it. Every client was taken care of. We showed up every single day for a business that was hanging by a thread, because that's what you do when you've decided that the mission matters more than the chaos. Scott ended up making it in 2021. He came out the other side. Something had shifted. We had proven something quietly, and we had held this thing together when he couldn't. So the business had grown enough that we moved out of our handmade PDF documents that we'd been running everything on and into an actual CRM by June of that year, a real system. And when Scott set that account up, he named me on that account as a 50% partner. Just a homeschool mom. 50%? That's more than two. I need you to hear both of those things at the same time. Now, I want to talk to you about the summer of 2022, because this is actually one of my favorite chapters. It's the one where I stopped calling myself a homeschool mom and started calling myself something else. I know, homeschool mom gone rogue. I think that I felt like my value had increased by then. Have you ever had something happen in your life where you know that your value has increased, but you don't know quite how to claim it? Well, the kids had decided they wanted summer jobs, real ones where they didn't work for mom and dad. And they landed at a KOA in West Yellowstone, Montana. And the company wouldn't hire them without a parent on the payroll. So I got to become a KOA employee, 9 to noon, back in the office from 5 to 10 every single day for 5 months, minus my 2 days off a week, which sounds adventurous because you're near one of the best national parks in the country, right? Until you're exhausted and your feet hurt and you're answering emails about RV roofing between 12 and 4 every day. I was really mad at first. This was not the plan. I had a company to run. I had momentum. I did not sign in to clock in and clock out like it was, 1995. But somewhere around day 7, I realized that I could run the entire company from noon to 4 every day. 4 hours if I was focused and intentional, without any distractions, no drift, no 3-hour rabbit holes, just the work that actually moved the scale. So I got busy. Frank took over everything else. He went back to baking bread. Not really, but he did cook dinners. He did do laundry. He did help homeschool the kids that were still, school age at that point. We kind of switched roles completely, but he didn't do a single install that summer. And that summer taught me something that I carry with me even to this day, a lesson that I would desperately need 2 years later when everything fell apart. A business can only run when you are personally holding every thread. Is not a business, it's a job. If you want real freedom, you have to build systems that can survive your absence. Now, at that point, we hadn't fully built those systems yet, and I don't know that they're fully in place now, but they're definitely on their way. But that summer planted a seed. So when we pulled out of West Yellowstone in October, something had shifted. We'd added live events to the mix. Rallies, shows, in-person inspections, not just the Tampa Super Show. Frank on the roof, photos in hand, me at a table, sales more than doubled. The older kids started working alongside Frank on installs at that point. We were a full family operation in the truest sense of the word. It was working, it was growing, and it was at least half ours. And then we walked into 2024. Let's take a breath here because I need it, because this part of the story is still pretty heavy. And like I told Kimberly, this whole story in its full version has never been told on camera anywhere, maybe around a campfire with some close friends. But this is important. We'd talked to Scott on the 4th of July. Completely normal conversation. Plans, business, the kind of call you hang up with and you don't think twice because you assume there's going to be another one tomorrow. Well, the next morning I got a call from someone I didn't know, which wasn't uncommon because we own a nationwide RV roofing company. So I answered the phone. Hi, you've reached RV Roofing Solutions. Well, a woman claiming to be Scott's daughter was on the other end of that line. And I had no idea who she was. He had never mentioned her name. And she said, Scott's on the way to the hospital. I hung up. There was silence, a whole week of silence. No news, no answers. It was worse than when Scott had COVID because at least, we had another associate helping us navigate some of that. But in this situation, we did not. So we did what we'd learned to do already. We dug in. We kept running installs. We were on our way to rallies. We got the teams paid. Clients got taken care of. We had been added to the account for the business in 2024 on leap year. um, and a week after that call that day, we learned that Scott was gone, completely gone. And the family, who had every right to grieve, however they needed to grieve, never asked once about the installs, not once about the details, not once about how many teams we had on the road, not once how many technicians or jobs we had lined up, never asked about the rally calendar. A few days later, they'd call me back and offer me $15 an hour to manage the company. $15 an hour. Now, I don't say that with any bitterness. I genuinely don't think that they knew what we were building. Scott had kept a lot close to his chest. But here is what I did know. The paperwork was not all filed the way he said it would be. I had an email that stated that we were a partner. I had a bank account that the family now had access to. The foundation that we had now all had gaps. This was a dumpster fire. A real genuine everything is on fire once all at once dumpster fire. Grief, uncertainty, legal exposure, no clear ownership, teams counting on us, clients on the calendar, and the question sitting right in the middle of it, do we walk away? And we could have. There were 100 reasonable arguments to walk away at that point. But we kept coming back to one question. What about the teams? What about the installers every week that did good, honest work and counted on this company to keep the wheels turning for their families? And we'd learned something else, that Scott had failed to file his paperwork for 18 months previously. So within lawyers, we hired a lawyer, filed for a new business entity, and getting the name RV Roofing Solutions was no problem because the old one had just not been registered. We set up a bank account. We kept the operation moving without missing a beat. And the reality was most of the items were already in my name because Scott had put them there. So RV Roofing Solutions with Frank and Jennifer was born in the middle of grief and paperwork and uncertainty on July 10th, 2024, and a stubborn refusal to let something good die because the road got hard. Now, the story doesn't end here. In fact, we're just getting started. The next year was the hardest year of my professional life. Momentum slowed down. Things were messy. We restructured what was setting up still doing shows, still showing up. The calendar doesn't care that you're grieving. You just have to keep going. And, I guess in that way, we're fortunate being married to a Marine and a Marine wife. We kept the fire burning even when he was gone. So you need to know that the dumpster story is not the end of your story. It's just part of it. Every single entrepreneur in this room, if you're building something real at all, will have a dumpster fire moment or 20. Maybe you already have. Maybe you're in one right now. The fire comes. It's not a maybe the fire's coming. The question isn't really whether or not it comes. The question is whether you're willing to build something strong enough to survive it and whether you have the faith to keep going while it burns. We had both, barely some days, but both. That version of me that was just a homeschool mom could have never carried that. But the version of me that had spent years learning, building, failing, showing up, and refusing to let someone else's ceiling become my floor, she was ready. Frank actually took a part-time job doing bookkeeping during the season because we had to, because we'd been preparing without knowing we were preparing. So let's spring forward. It's 2025. We're in the middle of rebuilding everything. Something happened. It actually had been in motion for about 2.5 years without me fully realizing it. So we're going to go back to a campfire because that's where this side of the story starts. Because I'm not one business owner, I have two. This is the way best parts of the story always seem to start, around a campfire with people you trust, having the kind of honest conversations that you can only have when the world gets quiet enough to think. So we were sitting with our friends Doug, and he had built something called Learn to RV. It was a WordPress blog, a Facebook group, a YouTube channel, a community. But life had shifted for Doug. He was getting off the road. His wife had gone through some surgeries. They were transitioning. And somewhere around that fire, Doug mentioned that he was thinking about letting it go. And I said, if you ever decide that you're ready to let go of it, I'd just like you to consider me. That was it. No negotiation, no business plan, just a quiet ask around a fire. But then we'd wait 2.5 years. So you're going back to 2022, 2023 when that conversation actually happened. That's a lesson in itself. Sometimes the right thing to do is just plant a seed and walk away and trust that the timing will work out when it's coming. So in the spring of 2025, we were in Florida. Doug and his wife, Mandy, sat down with Frank and I at a dinner, and Doug said, I'm ready to give it up for adoption. So we adopted Learn to RV. We bought it, but it's a whole thing. But I want to be honest about what I inherited. A WordPress blog that isn't really actively maintained, a Facebook group that had been quiet for probably, I don't know, a year or two, a YouTube channel with great videos, but it was dormant. The heartbeat had gotten faint. And I saw what I had always seen, a dream of a media powerhouse. But here's the thing about Learn to RV that I want you to understand. And if you're listening today and you want to be a contributor, there's room for you there. It's not about me. It's never been about me on Learn to RV. That is completely intentional. It's a community ecosystem. We have writers who dedicate their time building content, showing up for this community because they believe in what it represents. We have community groups, Facebook groups, specialty groups built around different ways that people live and travel and experience this life. We have a road schooling group, which is part of my passion. But we also have, a solo or a ladies group for ladies that need a place to go. But this is a growing resource, and it's certainly not a one-woman show. So by that summer, because we're only a couple months in, someone said, you should start a podcast. And I went, we should not start a podcast. Are you crazy? But the podcast launched by Hershey in 2025 with 3 co-hosts on day one, with 5 episodes that dropped on the first day so that people could go in and binge those episodes. And Tasha Martin is my today co-host. Our other co-host did not stay. It's a story for another day. But Tasha is deeply invested and involved. She shows up for this community with everything she has. And I would say to you that this podcast is ours, not just mine. By October, we launched a community spotlight series within that podcast. So now we're doing 2 podcasts a week because remember, I mentioned that we were a little crazy. But it's always been about the community story, people's stories, not just mine. Our co-host left in December to move on to a few other projects, another pivot. That's our word of 2026. We're just a pivot machine. And Tasha and I dug in and came back stronger with season 2 in February. Midway through season 2, we just launched probably like 5 weeks ago a series called Beyond the Brand. Beyond the Brand is bigger than just a monetization strategy, although that is part of it. It's the beginning of a trade publication. Brands come in, tell their story behind the business, their heart, their origin, their why. And there is a charge for that series, but it creates something genuinely valuable for our listening community. And the two things are really not in conflict. A healthy business model has to be able to pay for itself. We had two people walk into the ecosystem in last at Hershey and also understand the vision. Joel and Christina. Now, travel with the Brams, they were hand selected because they didn't see Learn to RV as it is. They saw what we were doing and they saw what we could make it become. And Christina is the one that looked at me in Hershey in September and said, "You should have a course. This is Learn to RV." I said, "I don't have time to write a course." So she said, "We could write it." So we are together. The Learn to RV, the course is in pre-sale right now, and it launches May 15th. Joel and Christina are building something alongside me, and we're helping with it. But we're going to serve our viewers. And every single one of us that's doing this is been around for a long time. So if you're RV curious or you know someone that is, this is an early adopter moment. The price will go up when it launches. But the thing about this course was the fact that you could go to Learn to RV and find all of it on our website, every single detail. But this is going to be concisely packaged. So if you want that time freedom, and most people do, this will be right there for you. This July, we'll bring back the Learn to RV Summer Scavenger Hunt. And if you participated last year, yay! But it's an all online community wide event with real prizes from real sponsors. In fact, Kimberly was one of those sponsors last year, built around the belief that adventure is better together and community doesn't stop when you just get to the campground. So it's fun, it's free, and it's exactly the kind of thing that makes me remember why we do this. Writers, community groups, a podcast co-host who was all in, course creators who believed in us before we were a course, a sponsorship series that's coming together as a trade publication, the Summer Scavenger Hunt coming soon, bringing tons of RVers together. With the course launch, it's going to change how people start this RV life. It's an ecosystem from just a homeschool mom. Building a media brand, a podcast, a course, and a community. From scratch, with no budget, no credentials, no industry backing, just a vision, a team who believed in us, and the absolute refusal to gatekeep it. So here we are, 13 years, 2 companies, 60 plus podcast episodes to date. One just launched today. If you're interested in the flock, Don Florzik's on there today. A course launching May 15th. A brand built on the road with 6 kids in an RV and more roadblocks than I can count on both hands. If you're sitting here today and you're carrying a dream that feels too big, too dependent on things working out just right, the roadblocks don't stop. You need to know that. They do not stop. The dumpster fires don't stop either. The pivots and the hurdles and the seasons where everything feels like it's falling apart all at the same time, they're part of your journey. Not a detour from it. Part of it. But the difference between the people who build something real and the people who don't, it's not talent. It's not timing. It's not the resources or the connections for the right circumstances. It's the decision to keep going when everything else tells you to quit. Now, that being said, if you're coming on the road and you don't have an income, please be careful because we've seen so many people come on the road and fail. And I'm not saying don't chase your dream. I'm saying be willing to dig in and make it work for as long as you need to. Maybe it's in a break room at KOA at 5 in the morning. Maybe it's around a table. Maybe it's while you're out walking. Maybe it's after your business partner died and the lawyers were on speed dial and nothing was certain anymore. But those decisions are available to you right now, today. And I'm sitting here, and I want every single person that's listening to understand there's a mission-driven business, the ones built on serving people rather than impressing them, rooted in faith rather than fear, measured by impact, not just optics. And it can survive the dumpster fires. Because when your foundation is the mission, the fire burns around you, but not through you. I'm reminded regularly about how gold is refined in the fire. The chaos can be real, but it's not the whole story. The other side of a very hard season can bring a version of you that's stronger, clearer, and more ready than you would have been if it had been easy. I know, because I'm standing here to tell you. Build now, build consistently, build with integrity. Trust that the foundation you're building and you're laying today is exactly what you'll need when the storm comes, because it's coming, but you're going to get through it. Because when you build the foundation before you need it, it always helps. Let's talk for a minute about being just a homeschool mom. And maybe you weren't a homeschool mom. Maybe you were a stay-at-home parent. Maybe you were just figuring it out. Maybe you were just a cashier. Maybe you were just trying to help. Remember, I started this journey as just a homeschool mom. We're here 13 years later. We launched our RV in 2013. We're on the third RV, by the way, not the first. I own 2 businesses. I host a podcast, usually 3 times a week. I was just recently named a 2026 RV Pro honorary woman across all 3 of those business entities, something that's never actually been done before. In fact, when it first happened, I said to Frank, "Oh, I got named, but it's not a really big deal," but it is. I own an aftermarket RV roofing company. It's never been recognized in the industry. RV Pro typically is going to recognize the women in the industry that work in the businesses where they're like at the OEM dealerships. They're not going to talk about a homeschool mom, just a homeschool mom. I didn't fit their qualifications, remember? What it did for Learn to RV was something entirely different. They named it Learn to RV as part of that, and it will be out in the May publication. So if you don't subscribe to RV Pro and you want to see the article, they will name me. It's very cool. But also podcast host. And podcast hosts aren't on that list either. I went back and looked at all the previous years because I needed to know that. I'm still proudly and unapologetically a homeschool mom. The just was never the truth. It was just a lie I almost believed. You are not just anything. You are exactly what your community needs. The skills that you're building behind the scenes and the margins, the ones that maybe nobody's even paying you to do yet, the ones that feel small and maybe even invisible, those are the skills that are going to change everything. You just have to trust that. The road is long. The obstacles are real. The dumpster fires, they're coming. I mean, there's no way to stop them. And the faith is not the absence of fear. It's just the decision to move forward anyway, trusting that the same door that God opened in the first place hasn't stopped working. That has been the anchor for everything that Frank and I have done. It's not just a strategy. It's not just a system. It's not a social media following or a business plan or a perfect moment, although we do have those in place for all of these things now. But faith kept us moving when moving made no logical sense. That's the real secret. But I won't gatekeep it. One day at a time, one decision at a time, one rally, 1 mile, one campfire, one connection at a time. That's how you build something that's last. It'll last for as long as you want it to, or it won't, and you'll pivot. But that's freedom. That's what we came on the road to find. That's what we found. And that's why we're building this every single day for our family, for our teams at RV Roofing Solutions, for Learn to RV, for the thousands of RVers in the RV community that are just need someone to tell that they don't have to figure it out alone. Just a homeschool mom that kept the wheels turning. You can find us on Learn to RV the podcast, Learn to RV the course, or learntorv.com. Or if you want to talk about RV roofing, you can find us at rvroofingsolutions.com. Thanks, Kimberly. Keep the wheels turning.
Jennifer, so, so good. I was taking notes and
I
I
didn't cry much. I did good.
I quit taking notes because I could not keep up. It was just so much and so many nuggets. I put some things in the YouTube chat too, that stood out to me. The comfortable is its own trap. I think that resonates because I see it all the time. I am it all the time, not all the
Yeah.
time, but often I find it in myself, where you're happy, you're satisfied, and you don't take that. And then the other thing I put in the chat was, um, if you want real freedom, build systems. And we are definitely going to be talking about that throughout this summit today. So that was good. Love the beans and rice. Been there, done that. And
I
thank
mean, it's
you.
just real, I
Yeah,
mean, like that's the thing is I think so many people think that you build things and you don't have to like, wait till payday to buy food again. We had a storage bay that like literally had one of those big mason jars of beans and one with rice, and they were our backup more times than I can count. So, a little bit of salt, pepper, and garlic, and you're good.
there you go. You got a meal. You got a meal. And then I wanted to talk a little bit. What just if you don't mind a few moments, I wanted to address kind of the backbone that you had. You talked about it being faith.
Yeah.
You talked about making decisions. What was it that drove you to learn the marketing, to keep at it?
So I always believed that the other company would want me. I did a lot of the reaching out. A lot of the people that worked with that company specifically were people we brought on the team. And so um, it was for them. I mean, genuinely, it was for them. I knew the freedom that it gave us. Some of those teams that came on, that was their whole income. We were fortunate in the way that, we still had the backup income, if you want to call it that. It wasn't much, but it was backup income, and the first RV we owned outright. And so, like, literally, we were that freedom. And so, I think it was for everybody else. Like I wanted everybody to be able to feel that dream. Like come on the road for 2 years. If you need a way to make money, I can help you. And so I would be in those Facebook groups, saying, are you a hard worker? And I would vet them. Like I didn't just by the time they got to that company, they had already made a decision and they were qualified. And so I really believe that that was part of it. So, bringing that to the table, realizing after we'd been on a couple different, they treated us so well. Like they took us on vacations. They were work vacations, but like we'd fly in somewhere, they'd fly us in. It wasn't until the last time where I realized that it was their dream, not mine. And so that was that shift of time. Um, And I thought, well, we could do this on our own. We didn't have the capital, but we could do this on our own. And so when Scott actually brought me on for $100 a week, like Frank was making decent money. This was just play money. This was money we could put away for vacations, that sort of thing. And so it was literally like, well, we could do that. And I'm just doing marketing. There's no cross reference here. There's nothing. I'm not selling roofs. Um, and the integrity behind who Frank and I are, we wouldn't even share so much as like a sneeze with customers' information because that just wasn't who we were. So I still cared deeply about that company. We wanted it to thrive. We had no idea by July we'd be looking for different work. So
I love that. And I love kind of the balance that you've shared with us today of making those decisions, moving forward in faith, but also letting things unfold. Sometimes
What
making things happen and sometimes letting them unfold.
Yeah, well, sometimes you have to. I mean, when Scott
Yeah.
died, that was a perfect time where, going back to that moment. So I have two real good friends in the RV industry, and that's how I found out that he hadn't reapplied for his business license. And I don't know why that didn't happen. Um, but we look back and go, I mean, like that's how we still have the name RV Roofing Solutions. Now,
Hmm.
this year I have looked at it and gone, do I wish I'd changed the name? I don't know yet. But, because, maybe something that was entirely ours would have been good. We could have still shifted that as a 50% partner. I still had, assets in that. But a lot has changed since Scott left. A lot of the practices that Scott did do have been modified and improved.
Sure.
We brought every material that he used to use and we brought it all back stateside. So we are now a US based company where all of our products are now sourced right here in the United States. That was very important to a Marine Corps, my
Hmm.
husband who's a Marine. And so
Hmm.
that is a big part of why we did that. The other side of it is, as a Marine, we do now offer, discounts and benefits to veterans and their families, as well as first responders, teachers, all teachers, not just, homeschool moms too. And then we've got some really great partnerships that have taken me years to acquire. In 2025, we became an FMCA, now FRVA benefit partner, a Tiffin benefit partner. Those were the two big ones. And then in January, Open Roads approached us about being a benefit partner with them. And our latest benefit partner is actually, it's called RV Overnights. My friend Rob has this great program. And so Rob is, so we're now, so if they're an RV Overnights VIP member, they actually can get a discount there too. So
Awesome.
we've been partnering all of those things all along. So that's about the systems and stuff you put in place too. So,
Right.
there's a lot more to RV roofing solutions that I didn't talk about. But, I thought that the heart of it is don't quit. And
Hmm.
every single one of us has been just something someday in their life, just a cashier, just an, RV tech, there's probably RV
Just
techs
a
that
girl.
just a girl. I get that one a lot, actually.
Just a girl.
Yeah. So, especially
Yeah.
in the space where I'm working with a lot of men,
Yeah.
I actually hear that a lot where, we were at a rally one time where my son was there and this guy was talking to me at the booth and he turned to Justin as he walked up and started asking all the questions. And I was like, well, that's odd. Like, and he looks at the guy and he goes, my mom's the owner. She knows way more than I do. But that just a girl thing is a thing. It's a real thing. And
Yeah.
and most people don't even think about it.
Yeah. Yeah. It is a real thing. And like you said, there's a lot of just. So I
Yeah.
think that that really hits home. And I have so many more notes and so many I didn't take. So I'm gonna have to go listen again. And luckily we'll have the replay up. Jennifer,
Well,
thank you so
thank you,
much.
Kimberly. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I really appreciate having you today. And
Awesome.
we will talk again soon. And make sure you guys go and check out learntorv.com. And I think there's links to the blog and the podcast and all the things right there.
Yeah, if you go to
Yep.
learntorv.com, you can get everywhere from there. It's
Excellent.
it's it's very much set up that way. When I say
Excellent.
media powerhouse, I genuinely mean that I think that we're going to be the next trade publication.
Okay. All right. We'll keep our eyes on you. Okay, Jennifer. Have a great day. And we'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
All righty. So, fabulous kickoff to the Anchored in Freedom Summit. And I see our next speaker.